Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Another podcast, another day. I'm joined by a great guest, David Tilton of the Bills Guys. This podcast, one of my favorite podcasts in Western New York. You got Judge Mathis on the other side of the coin. You got David Tilton. I got one half of the duo, the dynamic duo that is the Bills Guys. David, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. We've been trying to get this going for a while, so it's good to finally get on here and chat with you about the Bills.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure chatting with you about the Bills, and to do it now on this audio or on this visual platform. I've really enjoyed putting together these visual, interviews, podcasts. The people have enjoyed it. That's the day and age that we're living in, right? This 2020 year has ushered in a new era, I think, of podcasting in terms of Zoom or StreamYard or any of the other streaming services out there. So to anyone that's tuning into this right now, feel free to fire some questions away. We will get to them towards the end of the show. But first off, David, I want to get your take on this 3-0 start for the Buffalo Bills. We're now atop the AFC East through the first 3 weeks. A win over the Jets, a win over the Dolphins, and a too close for comfort win, in my opinion, against the LA Rams. What are your thoughts, basically, on this 3-0 start? Your likes and maybe your dislikes of the Bills 3-0 start, if there is any.
Well, I think going into the early part of the schedule, you had to look at this before the season started and say, like, the Bills had to come away with 2 wins in those first 2 games, right? Division games, lesser opponents by all standards, right? I know Miami kind of like is on the upswing, at least from a personnel standpoint, it seems like, but the 2 division opponents, you had to win those games, right? And so the Bills took care of business there. And you look at that third game, the Rams game was kind of looming as like the game that, a lot of people probably figured could go either way. I mean, the spread indicated that as well, just based on the fact that the Bills were only I think it closed as 2-point favorites in the game. But to come away with that win against the Rams was obviously crucial because this division is going to be very tight this year. And I think that people maybe were a little bit too quick to dismiss the Patriots. I was not one of them. I actually thought the Patriots could win the division still. And, Cam has looked pretty solid and they're not going to go away quietly. So stacking wins early in the season is really important. Being 3-0 obviously is huge because we've got that game up right now. And the Pats winning those 2 division games is big, obviously, for tiebreakers. So my thoughts on obviously being 3-0, it's great. I would have been okay with 2-1, but 3-0 is obviously great. Winning against an NFC team obviously doesn't do much for us as far as playoff tiebreakers are concerned as we get towards the end of the season, but the 2 division wins are huge and we had to do it. Some likes, obviously Josh Allen, right? I mean, I think he has done what a lot of people I think were hoping he would do in this third year, but maybe even quicker into a higher level than a lot of us even expected. I think, we were hoping for that progression from year 2 to year 3 for him to kind of take that next step and kind of own the offense. And he's done that very early on in the season. So now it's a matter of kind of keeping that consistency throughout. And although statistically, I don't think this pace for him is going to keep up, which is fine. It's more about winning games. Right. That's what we need to worry about. So I've liked that, and I've liked what I've seen from the offense, especially the passing offense. It's been huge. Dislikes, obviously, I think have kind of reared their ugly head in the last 1.5 to 2 games here. That the middle of the field defense for the Bills has not been great, whether that's in the run game or in the pass game. We've seen the Bills get kind of abused on the ground a little bit the last 2 games. Some chunky run plays, especially from. I don't want to discredit the running backs we've faced, but they're not the upper echelon running backs of the NFL that we're going against the last 2 games. You're talking about Myles Gaskin and Darrell Henderson and Malcolm Brown. These are good players, but they're not elite players. And so that worries me a little bit. And I'm hoping that some of that is obviously Edmonds and Milano were out for that Miami game, and maybe they weren't exactly 100% for that Rams game. And I'm kind of hanging my head on that to say, but you got to worry. I think you got to start worrying a little bit about the defense, right? I talked about this with Steve on our show Monday, was it's very hard to have a sustained elite defense over several years. It's much easier to sustain a high-powered offense over years than it is a defense. We saw what happened to Jacksonville from 2017 to now. They completely dropped off. Ranting Ron made a good point yesterday where it's like we don't talk about like the 2000 to 2005 Ravens defense. We only talk about the 2000 defense. We talk about the 85 Bears defense. We don't talk about like the 85 to 90 Bears defense. So is this the downfall? I hope not. It's largely the same personnel. So, and obviously the same scheme and coaching staff, but the defense, it's got me a little worried right now.
Yeah, and the defensive woes continued for sure. There's no doubt about it. And I love that you mentioned your likes. Obviously, I think everybody is liking Josh Allen, even those that are eating a little bit of the humble pie that thought that Josh Allen was a little bit of a raw prospect. You remember those days where they said that he was raw and that it would take him 3-4 years to be anything close to redeeming as a quarterback, where now we saw progression. Let's be honest, David, we saw progression year 1, year 2, from year 1 to year 2. Now we're seeing a massive leap from year 2 to year 3. And in terms of the defense, last week, what I saw in particular with that middle linebacker, Tremaine Edmonds, I thought it was a very tough day at the office for Tremaine Edmonds, and we all had him, whether we're playing in the National Football League or whether we had a rough day at the 9-to-5 job. Tremaine Edmonds just didn't seem to really be in on a lot of those plays. He was behind. Either he was too far in blitzing or he dropped back too quickly. And in particular, that screen pass to Robert Woods, I believe, Edmonds missed a tackle on that screen pass, and he missed a tackle on the Jamison Crowder screen pass. So it's almost as if these opposing offenses are trying to make quick plays against the Buffalo Bills defense because they don't have that quick twitch ability in the middle of the field in particular. Fitz even was able to, target his receivers over the middle of the field. So what would you say is the solution to that? Obviously that is a huge concern heading into week 4. They're going up against a better running back in Josh Jacobs, and they're definitely going up against, I think, the best quarterback, arguably, that they've faced, at least throwing the deep ball, in Derek Carr.
Well, for me, it kind of starts in the middle of the defensive line. I'd like to see the Bills getting a little more pressure up the middle. It seems like we've been close on the edges to getting to the quarterback. We're not still getting all the way home. So I think if we can generate some pressure up the middle with the defensive line between Oliver and Jefferson, Phillips, maybe we are missing Star a little bit there in the run game. I think we definitely are, but that's the run game aside. Up the pressure or up the middle pressure from Oliver and Jefferson, I think would really help. It would help the linebackers. It would help, Edmonds it would, clear the way for him to maybe make some more plays, but I've yet to see really too much of that up the middle pressure from the Bills. To this point, it's been Addison on the edge getting a couple sacks. It's been, Epinesa had his first sack last weekend, but it's very easy for good quarterbacks when there's no pressure up the middle to just step up in the pocket when the edge pressure is coming around them and make plays. And when they have that time, we've seen the middle of the field's been open. So to me, it starts with the middle of that defensive line. And I think that that's the key for me, especially now going against the Raiders, who have a very beefy offensive line, a good running back in Josh Jacobs. That middle of that defensive line, I think, needs to set the tone. And we said that last game, like the middle of the defensive line needs to set the tone against the Rams too. And they just really didn't, in my opinion. So I really think that's one of the keys, especially against Oakland.
Yeah, Vegas. I've done it too, Dave. I've done it too. The Vegas Raiders. Yeah, I've done it too. Trust me. I've made that.
I still Chargers San Diego, so
I've done it. Trust me. And I even said last week, if these teams would just stay where they're meant to be, where they've been for the last 40, 50 years, we wouldn't have any problems. But it's a corporate greed in the National Football League, and that stadium is pretty beautiful. So
yeah, it is
what
Star,
it is. Yeah, the Death Star. I love that. So yeah, we touched on it. Bills run defense versus Josh Jacobs. Are you worried about the Bills run defense this week? We talked about how the Bills can be better in the run defense. You mentioned that. As far as Star Latuile, I think he is sorely missed on this defensive line. I've had a lot of people fire comments at me during my live podcast where they say, where has Harrison Phillips been? Where has Ed Oliver been? Obviously, give credit where credit is due. The first 3 weeks, all three opponents that we have faced, been able to neutralize, Harrison, Phillips, Ed Oliver, and really stop that middle of the Bills' defensive line. But another topic that I'll really want to dive into, and I feel like this is a feel-good topic for the show that not many people know about. It's being, talked about in circles, but in spades a little bit here, but not enough. And last week this past Monday, they had the Chiefs versus the Ravens. And I couldn't stand how they marketed that matchup as Mahomes versus Jackson, because I knew that if one of them played poorly, it was due to the fact that their opposing defense stopped them. And that happened with Lamar Jackson. The Chiefs defense was everywhere. This game, though, I do look at it in kind of a hypocritical way. I am looking at it like Josh Allen versus Derek Carr, and in particular, Allen's chip on his shoulder. Dave, have you heard of this story between Josh Allen and Derek Carr, and the fact that Allen was brought in from Firebaugh High School to this camp at Fresno State? Derek Carr is like this, All-American, true D1 stud at quarterback for Fresno State. And they put Josh Allen in this group of quarterbacks that they deemed basically not good enough. And now here we are, week 4 of the 2020 NFL season. Josh Allen has taken over the AFC. And Derek Carr, there's been some ups and some downs in his career. What do you think of this whole narrative heading in with Allen's chip on his shoulder?
Yeah, it's probably like an under the radar narrative, actually, that maybe we should be talking about more. I mean, Allen's not going to forget. I mean, we saw him on the, on the show with Mark Sanchez. He mentioned, this was mentioned, how he's kind of still had that chip on his shoulder from still not being recruited at a high school to a D1 school. And obviously Derek Carr being there at Fresno, right in the backyard of where Josh Allen, is from is something that I'm sure he doesn't forget. And to be honest, Josh Allen probably just looks at it more holistically, I would say. And maybe it's not a personal thing with Derek Carr, but more holistically around having been overlooked. And if he can kind of stick it to a team that had one of these guys that, was recruited, and, Derek Carr's been a pretty good NFL quarterback. I wouldn't say he's been elite, but he's been pretty good. Then sure, that's just another, narrative to bust for Josh Allen, from the national stage. I don't think it's anything personal he has with Derek Carr, but I think it's just more of for him personally to kind of like prove once again that he can kind of get over on a guy that was like recruited higher than he was. At the end of the day, like, this game likely comes down to the two of these guys anyway, because, we've mentioned the Bills' struggles on defense. The Raiders have kind of struggled on defense as well. So this could end up being, a game of quarterbacks as it is. But it's funny to me because I think someone mentioned like it was either like 20, I think it was the 2019 stats. I think it was like Derek Carr had the most passes attempted under like 6 yards, I think, and Josh Allen had the least or something like that. Right. So it's like kind of opposite styles.
Like he's here, Carr's here, and Allen's way down. Complete polar opposites, really.
Yeah, polar opposites.
I find that fascinating.
Polar opposites. I mean, Bills passing offense is ranked near the top of the league this year. The Raiders not so much, but the Raiders could have a balanced offense. The one thing I would say is that, from a weapons standpoint, we obviously have to worry about Josh Jacobs, but the Raiders are banged up at their skill position. So probably advantage there for the Bills. Ruggs and Edwards may both be out for the Raiders. Right. So we'll see about that. But as far as the Allen versus Carr, for me, if I'm Allen, it's probably less of a personal thing with Carr and more of a holistic sort of thing that he's trying to bust that narrative.
Right. And, he mentioned, heading into the matchup, that he has a lot of respect for Derek Carr. He actually wanted to go to Fresno State because of Derek Carr. And ultimately, we know the story. He didn't get a major D1 scholarship offer. He had to go play JUCO football for a couple years. And then he gets a letter basically from Wyoming saying that we want you to be the face of the program, based on Allen and his parents sending out all of these videos of his highlights from JUCO. I mean, this is a true, like, I don't want to say rags to riches, but it is a true, like, diamond in the rough story that Josh Allen has pretty much arrived at the National Football League level when he played at Wyoming and I make this point all the time. Drafted 7th overall out of Wyoming. I don't know any other player that went to Wyoming that was picked in the first round. With all due respect, I think it's awesome that Allen was able to make it happen in Wyoming, and it's going to do wonders for their program. But it's just amazing to me that he's had all of this adversity. He's had all of these people saying that he was never going to make it, and even people laughing at the Buffalo Bills saying, well, they should have taken Josh Rosen, or they drafted the wrong Josh, or they should have taken Lamar Jackson as the next, Tyrod Taylor. I don't think there will ever be a week that I'm watching a Bills game and I won't hear those thoughts, right?
There won't be. I mean, the fact of the matter is like he had the physical attributes he had the physical body, arm strength, running ability to be a pro quarterback. The concern was always like the developmental side, right? Could he improve accuracy? Could he actually play in the pros? And he just never really had a chance, whether it was at the college level to play for a bigger program. And like, you kind of wonder, like going back, was it something that he was always battling, like from high school into JUCO, into getting to Wyoming? It was always just this thing of like, yeah, he's got these physical tools, but like he's never really had the chance to even show that he could grow or develop, because he only played, 2 years at Wyoming, and, obviously didn't get a lot of national attention other than from the NFL scouting side, having the physical tools. And then kind of like his most of his development, honestly, it was probably actually occurred in the last 3 years from a progression standpoint. Like, whereas you look at a lot of guys, like most of their kind of development, in these pro ready type of systems, like USC is a good example with Darnold. Like people feel like, oh, he's like a more pro ready guy. He knows, he's developed. Like it just shows you just never really know. And the Bills took a chance on the physical traits and their confidence in the coaching staff to develop him. And between Dayball and Dorsey and these coaches we have, they've really done a good job. And I think the one thing that Josh has always kind of said about himself and always kind of preach is that he's always willing to learn. He's willing to put in the time. And I just don't think anyone else was ever willing to give him that chance in the past. So good for him. Diamond in the rough, rags to riches, whatever you want to call it. We do also have to remember though, that it has only been 3 games. So let's like make sure he can continue to do these things and doesn't regress back. I mean, I hope he doesn't. We all don't want that to happen, but the 3 games, you can't ask for much better.
You can't. And when you look at how the other quarterbacks that were drafted that year, Darnold, Mayfield, Lamar, Rosen, I mean, when you look at these quarterbacks and how their careers have sort of panned out so far, I look at the team and more oftentimes than not the situation, right? And the Bills were able to bring Allen in with all these people saying that he's raw, it's going to take him time. Well, Buffalo just said, okay, well, we're going to put him out there, see what he can do. Inexplicably, I will mention they did start Nate Peterman to start Josh Jones' rookie season. I still don't understand that, because I went to the training camp in 2018, and I said to myself, the best player on that offense is Josh Allen. And I was blown away with the ability that he has to throw on the run. And I started to see those little things that we've seen, these last 3 seasons. And they've built around this guy so well. I mean, Stephon Diggs, John Brown, Cole Beasley. And I want your take on this as well. In the first 3 weeks of the season, I don't think the Bills have established a run game as efficiently as I would have hoped prior to the season starting. I saw shades of it this past week with Devin Singletary, but I want to see this guy featured in the offense more. And obviously, Zach Moss was out last week, but I hope that Devin Singletary and Zach Moss, when both healthy, are heavily featured in this offense more in the coming weeks.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I mean, the Bills have thrown the ball over 30 times in each of the first 3 games, 46 times that, in that first game. So, Steve and I were kind of debating this, is this the Bills offense now? Are we a pass first kind of offense? Are we, and like just kind of like pass to set up the run a little bit more? Whereas like we're so used to, the last probably 10 or so years being like a run first team. We've had very, highly ranked rushing offenses. Even under McDermott's first year, I think we were like 3rd in the NFL in rushing. And last year we were top 8, I think, or so. So, and obviously Allen contributes to some of that. But, Singletary got, I think, 17 touches in this last Rams game. I think he had 12 or 13 rushes and 4 or 5 catches, which I think I'm okay with. If on the other side of that, you have a guy like Zach Moss maybe getting another 10 or so. I don't know that the Bills are going to all of a sudden go back to being like a run first team.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean that Singletary can't be involved, but I don't think that he's going to be a 25 touch a game guy. If I think 17, like we saw maybe this past week, it might be like his max, honestly. And the thing was, this last game, he was super efficient with the touches, right? Great in the passing game, over 5 yards of carry in the running game. Now all of a sudden you get Zach Moss back in the mix, and he's adding another maybe 10 carries into that. Then maybe you see the Bills kind of coming down more towards that 30 passing attempts a game, maybe 25-ish or so to 30 rushing attempts, and you get closer to that 50-50. I also think it should be opponent specific as well. It seems like the Bills really wanted to make a statement these first couple games and come out airing it out. And that kind of leads to the statistics Josh has had. And like I said, I don't know that those are going to, he's going to keep that pace up all year. But, I think this might be the Bills offense now, this pass first kind of offense, 60-40-ish type of ratio. And to me, what it says is the Bills said, look, we're going all in on Josh Allen. We're giving him the keys to the car. He's going to own this offense. We're going to really see what he can do for this team to take it to its ceiling. Chiefs did it with Mahomes. Ravens did it with Lamar. Seahawks have obviously done it in the past with Russell. But for the Bills to really reach their true potential and possible, Super Bowl run, they had to do this. They had to let Josh Allen kind of take the keys and see what he could do and not kind of like be so conservative with what they're going to do on offense. And they've done that, and they've kind of been rewarded. The organization has. And so we'll see if it can continue. But I don't know, man. To me, I think 17-ish or so touches for Singletary a week I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I definitely see, your logic there. I don't want to see Devin Singletary banging the football in between the tackles. That's
right.
Not the type of running back that he is. With all due respect to him, I think his strong suit is in space, and that's what I want to see. I want to see Devin Singletary be that. For all the fantasy football fanatics out there, I want to see Devin Singletary become a PPR monster that I think he is. I think he could be, and we saw it a little bit this past week. I want to see it dialed up. I want to see it more because defenses have blitzed Allen. They like to blitz him. They like to force him to extend a play. And he's just so good at it that these defenses have to come away thinking, what the hell do we throw at this guy? But one of those facets of the offense, blitzing Allen, if we're going to accept that he's being blitzed, which he has been, I think they need to find Devin Singletary out in space a little bit more. And I hope to see that. I think that it could add a completely new dimension to their offense. And the one thing, when you look at this offense, you look at it and you say, who do you stop? I mean, you have Diggs. If Diggs is double covered, John Brown could reap the reward. If John Brown is being covered, Diggs, Beasley had a great week this past week. I don't think that's being talked about nearly enough, and 6 catches and 100 yards. So I just
Davis as well too.
Right, and Gabe Davis. I mean, what is your take on this young stud, Gabe Davis? I've heard rumblings about him. Knew about him in college, but heard massive rumblings about how efficient he was in the training camp practices. What do you think of Davis so far and how he's been used in the offense?
I love how they're using them, right? They're not asking him, they're asking him maybe to do more than maybe even we thought he would. I mean, certainly more than I thought he would before camp. As camp went on, I could say like, oh, well, he's going to add, an element for us on the outside, or maybe use him as a big slot. But at the end of the day, the report on him coming out of college, he was more of a straight line type of route runner, and that he could contribute on special teams. But I think what you're seeing out of him, and maybe it's like kind of like it's not a great comparison as far as like speed necessarily, but like DK Metcalf was the guy that everyone was like, oh, he can only run in a straight line, but he's fast and like whatever. Like people probably maybe pigeonhole Davis as more of like a strider and a kind of outside down the field guy, and didn't maybe give him enough credit for the route running that he could develop, because he wasn't necessarily asked to do that too much at CF. So he's shown, I think, that he can run more than just those deep routes, which I think has allowed him to kind of contribute more in the offense. And also, what it does as well is you saw what happened in this Rams game. John Brown goes out with an injury. You're not really losing anything now with a guy like Gabe Davis coming in and still being able to play those 3 wide sets with him, on one side and Diggs on the other and Beasley still in the slot. So it's really given the Bills some insurance as well, especially because they're running a lot of, they're actually running a lot of spread, a lot of 3 and 4 wide receiver sets. So I'm really happy with what he's brought to the table. I was like before camp, I was like all about Isaiah Hodgins and him being like a better route runner than Davis, but Davis clearly like proved me wrong there that he could do more. So very happy. And the Bills may have found a stud here in Gabe Davis. So, and potentially an heir apparent to John Brown if when his contract is up.
Right. Those were fantastic points. And talk about a guy that was slept on, DK Metcalf. All of these GMs that passed on him have to be thinking to themselves, what the hell were we thinking? Like, there's always these perceptions of these players. And it's like, yeah, he might have had a limited route tree in college, but you put him in that offense with Russell Wilson can make things happen. So
as long as he's not dropping the ball right before the 1 yard line, right?
Yeah, that did happen. I didn't want to mention that in case there was any Seahawks fans watching this. I doubt there is, but I do share it on NFL groups though. Yeah, so I definitely agree with you that there is a skill similarity between Brown and Gabe Davis. And I think over the middle of the field, that adds another option too. Like Diggs can run any route, right? John Brown, I think, is a great stretch the field guy. He proved that to me almost every week last year, especially burning Stephon Gilmore on Sunday Night Football. That was awesome. And Cole Beasley, the, quintessential slot receiver that has been in this league, just, knowing his role the last few years in this Bills offense, I think last couple. And now Gabe Davis, it adds another dimension over the middle of the field. And I think Allen, last week I actually saw a stat chart from Next Gen Stats. They compiled all of the passing charts from Allen's first 3 weeks. Allen over the middle of the field, that is where he has made his progress. That is where he has made his yards, and these guys are getting yards after catch. So a lot of people said last year and years prior that Allen over the middle of the field, he's lacking. Well, that's where he has actually grown heading into year 3. So I've loved this 3-0 start. I know last week's game, way too close for comfort for me. My heart was beating like, I think my iWatch said, like 120 beats a minute. It was ridiculous. So definitely. I'm hoping that this week is more of a resounding, solid victory to get to 4-0. And what do you think that is the biggest question? Like, where do you see the Raiders posing the biggest threat outside of the run game, if any?
I think Darren Waller over the middle, aka like what Mike Gesicki did to us in week 2. Carr, quick release. Gruden, like that's been his kind of thing. We talked about how his depth of target and depth of attempt has been very low on average. Had the most like sort of quick, short passing game attempts. So I see that as being an issue. Now Waller was banged up coming out of the week 2 game, and he obviously practiced in a limited fashion only one day last week before finally suiting up against the Pats, and the Pats really neutralized him. I think he only had 2 catches for, it might have even been under 10 yards. So I don't know how healthy he was for that game, although he did suit up. We'll obviously see what comes out of the practice reports today, but if Waller is healthy and 100%, he would be my concern, especially given what Gesicki did and Higbee a little bit later in that game for the Rams. The Bills have struggled a little bit against tight ends. And even going back to that Jets game, Herndon was open on a couple plays and Darnold just didn't hit him. So outside of that running game, I would be quite concerned with the quick passing game to Darren Waller in this game if I'm the Bills.
And as we mentioned, Derek Carr likes to throw it, 10 yards or under, maybe even 7 yards or under. So, now that they have weapons that can stretch the field and Henry Ruggs, it's almost like an addition by subtraction, though, because as we talked about earlier, Ruggs probably very well might not be playing in this game. So it's almost like the Raiders have to revert back to their offense that they ran last year, which was it had moments of being inefficient. So I think that this Bills defense, this to me has to be a big statement game for the Bills defense. Coming off of those last couple weeks where that Ryan Fitzpatrick picked them apart here and there, and obviously Jared Goff was able to lead a valiant comeback effort. This past week. I want to get to some comments here too. We got some comments from the folks at Buffalo Fanatics, Buff Fanatics. Morning coffee and tilt money fire. They're loving what you got. I love the takes too. You've done a great
it.
job. Yeah, awesome. So they say St. Louis Rams for life as well. Oh man, I think
they're getting on my case for calling them the Oakland Raiders. I think. And,
I think they are, but just hearing St. Louis Rams, I'm thinking Kurt Warner, Marshall Faulk, Torrey Holt.
Oh, yeah.
Isaac Bruce, greatest show on turf, no doubt about it.
Akeem, don't forget him.
Akeem, yeah, oh my lord. And Dick Vermeil probably crying on the sideline in happiness, happy tears. Dick Vermeil. So, James Parsons says, we know what happens when the run game gets going. Then the middle of the field is wide open, and Carr loves little checkdowns in the middle. Hence, Darren Waller. And rags to riches story for Waller. He had a lot of trials and tribulations in his personal life. That story ranks right up there, I think, with Josh Allen's success these first 3 weeks this season. Darren Waller has been one of the best tight ends in the NFL. Even, if you kind of compiled some of his weeks from last season, where did this guy come from? I mean, he is everywhere. I watched HBO Hard Knocks with the Raiders, and I'm like, this guy is. I remember texting my dad saying, "Dad, you got to watch Hard Knocks. This Darren Waller guy is catching everything."
He's a specimen, man. Too. I mean, he is chiseled to the T. I mean, right. Hard Knocks really did him a lot of favors as far as putting him in the spotlight and getting him exposure. But that dude is a good tight end. I made a comment on Twitter, I think maybe last week after that huge game he had in week 2. I think you could put him right up there, right? I think right now is the number 3 tight end in the NFL behind Kelsey and Kittle. Honestly, I would put him right there.
Right. And I always say, with one player out, I kind of leave them off until they're back, just, psychologically, just making a list. So Waller is, now that Kittle's out, I don't know if he's coming back this week. I haven't checked, but Waller is definitely top 3. I mean, I think he's set in stone as top 3, and, Derek Carr will be looking to find him. Dean Jr., he left a little bit of a long one, but I'll still post it for him. He says, I'll read it so it doesn't cover our faces. I've been asking the same thing about Harrison Phillips. The defense has been really good. We've shut down people for the most part. No team has steamrolled us. We've stymied offenses early in games, but this is he makes a Kardashian butt comment. I don't know about that, but teams have had ginormous size deficits to come back from. It's like after our huge starts, we try to coast. What do you say to that? I think there is some validity to that, right? They've had these huge starts, and they've somewhat let these teams come back into it. In particular, even the Jets they let come back into it a little bit. So, fire away. What do you say to that?
Well, the third quarter hasn't been good to the Bills, going even back to last year, and I think part of that is the teams we're playing. If we get up, they're making these adjustments at halftime. Obviously, they're looking at what the Bills have done defensively, and they're making adjustments. And I would say the Bills need to do a better job. The coaching staff needs to do a little bit of better job, even between series, to adjusting to the other team's adjustments, if that makes sense. The Bills were slow to kind of react to what the Rams were doing. And a part of that may be because they were barely on the field on offense and they were giving the ball right back. Maybe they didn't have time to make adjustments, but it seems like, I don't think it's for a lack of trying. I think it's just a lack of execution. I don't think we're necessarily trying to coast, because even in that Jets game, we were still trying to throw. We were still trying to be aggressive. So I would liken it more to a lack of execution and maybe a slight lack of adjusting to how teams have adjusted to you coming out of the half, especially in the third quarter, than it is to kind of that we're coasting, if you will, taking the foot off the gas. Because I don't see us doing that. I don't see us just trying to run 3 times and punt. I still see us trying to pass the ball, still trying to be aggressive in that sense, but maybe the execution's just not there. So I would say it's probably more of that than it is coasting and then the adjustments being made by these teams. I mean, we've gone against, Sean McVay is one of the best, I think one of the better coaches in the league, and he's going to make adjustments and did so accordingly. And the Bills were maybe a little just slow to react to that.
Yeah, and you think about it just in terms of how these NFL games are played out, right? 2 quarters, they go into the locker room, they make the adjustments at halftime, and then the Buffalo Bills offense comes out in the third quarter and they're flat, and we've seen it even last season. And, I've been pretty public about my criticism for Brian Dable for as successful statistically as Allen has been, and for as positive. There's so many positive takes about this Bills offense, plenty of positive, as I've said on the show, Thomas takeaways. But there are moments in games where there is some play calling that kind of leaves your head kind of you kind of like, what was going on there? Like 3rd and 2, doing a direct snap to Devin Singletary, or running these reverses every single week with Isaiah McKenzie. With all due respect to Isaiah McKenzie, I love the guy, but when you run that play, it's almost like you're trying to catch the defense napping, and nobody seems to be napping on that. So it's one of those things that there's just some adjustments that I think there are so many new weapons on this offense that Dable, it's almost a work in progress that Dable has to figure out what other ways can you get Gabe Davis involved? What other ways can you get Tyler Croft involved, Dawson Knox involved? And what other ways can you get Singletary involved? And obviously we talked about that in depth via the passing game. I just think that this offense is actually so much better than what it has shown. And it's crazy to say that because it's been very successful. But I think that this offense could only get better as this season goes on. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously on the right track. I'm not going to be too worried about it. People make bad play calls. I mean, it happens. I get it. But you got to look at sort of last year to this year, at least so far. I mean, we only scored 19 points a game last year. We're scoring over 30 points a game this year, or right around that. So, I think Daboll has pretty much opened it up this year, at least to start with, and saying, like, look, we're going to be a passing team first. We're going to let Josh Allen run the show, and then we're going to use the running game as sort of like a pass to set up the run as opposed to a run to set up the pass. The only thing I would say there is that, play action has been very good to Josh Allen. So you don't want to forget that. You don't want to forget the running game altogether, right? You still got to leverage it. And even if you come out passing early, still use the play action. Josh Allen's been very good, even under center using play action. So I'd say the arrow is obviously pointing up. Daboll's going to learn, obviously, from these first couple of weeks, ideally, what's working, what's not working, some sequencing issues maybe he's had in the past that he can learn from, hopefully.
Right.
And let's be honest, people criticize Daboll because he's never even had a top half of the NFL offense in his days coordinating, but he's also had very, very limited personnel, we'll put it that way, in his stints as an offensive coordinator. This has been the best personnel he's had. So let's see what he can do with it. And, if he can clean up some of those kind of head scratchers, I think that we all see from time to time, then there's no reason this offense can't be one of the best in the league.
There's no doubt about it that that the whole team is a work in progress. And I think it's fantastic and really music to my ears when I hear an opponent give us credit prior to even playing them. That is a rarity, at least in the last 20 years for Buffalo Bills fans. We didn't hear that when, with all due respect, we just didn't hear that when, previous regimes were around. John Gruden has publicly praised Josh Allen. He said, quote, "This guy is a big-time player. He is eye-opening. He can play very much like John Elway." To hear a head coach of John Gruden's prowess offensively that has been in this league for a long time, that has evaluated quarterbacks almost at a comedic level in terms of watching the Gruden quarterback camp with all the VHS tapes and the rows of the Fired Football Coaches Association hats that he had. How refreshing is it to hear other coaches around the league not just credit Josh Allen, but credit this Buffalo Bills regime, in particular, Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane?
Well, I think coaches recognize and they can see what the Bills have done as far as a turnaround story in the last 2 or 3 years, right? Like coaches like Gruden and other experienced coaches know the struggles the Bills had gone through the last 20 years, right? So they can see and they know the Bills have struggled to find a franchise quarterback. They know they haven't made the playoffs for 17 years. So when they see this type of output from an offense that we haven't really had a good offense for years and years. It probably even going back to like the Bledsoe days, which was like really just right when the drought started. It's very high praise. And obviously, like, you always got the kind of courtesy compliments from Belichick, but that was more BS than anything, because he just wanted to make his team feel like, okay, these guys are good, even though he owned us. But Gruden, as a guy who, like, we don't really ever play often, and he's kind of coming back into head coaching in the last few years, that's really impressive to me, especially given his reputation with quarterbacks.
Yeah, I would say so. And in terms of knowing what he knows about Allen and knowing what even, Bill Belichick, John Gruden's not the only one. John Gruden has praised him. Bill Belichick has praised him. And his play speaks for itself, obviously. And it's easier to praise a quarterback when they're playing well. It's almost like it's a softball question. But the over the moon compliments. Like, if you actually watched this interview, folks, if you actually watched John Gruden when he was asked those questions about Josh Allen, it was almost as if he kind of wished he was his quarterback. Like, it was crazy. It was awesome. I loved it. That's the stuff that I love, when there's like that camaraderie, competitive camaraderie between one team and another. It's almost like, yeah, we respect what they can do. McDermott has built up this defense. They throw a lot of exotic blitzes that people don't really notice. They give different looks. And obviously Trey White. I mean, Trey White has been one of the best corners in this league the last few years. So I'm loving the praise that the Bills are finally getting. But to dive into the game this upcoming week, in order to dive into it properly, I always have to fire down a score prediction. So my score prediction for the folks at home, and you will provide yours as well, I'm going to go with 31-21 Bills. The Bills continue this 30-point scoring offense with 31 points. And the Bills defense does play it a little bit close once again. I think Derek Carr does find some success, in particular with guys like Jacobs and Waller, to the tune of 21 points. What is the David Tilton, the Bills guy, score prediction for the Bills and Raiders game?
Now, I got to stay consistent, because Ranting Ron asked me for my prediction too. So I'm going to stay consistent here. I think my reasoning here is I think there's not going to be a ton of stoppage in this game. What I mean by that is I think the clock will be moving a lot in this game. I think that will result in fewer possessions for each team. I think with the Raiders running the ball, they'll probably have some success there. The Bills being efficient on offense, I feel like the clock's going to be moving a lot. Possessions will take time off the clock, and so there'll be fewer for each. I do like the Bills to come out on top, especially if the Raiders are down both Bryan Edwards and Henry Ruggs, which Bryan Edwards, I think, has already been declared out, and we'll see if Ruggs is. So it's really going to come down to the Bills focusing on Jacobs and Waller, and it's like those two guys you kind of think about, going back to week one, focus on Le'Veon Bell and Chris Herndon. If you can do that, Jacobs and Waller obviously are a little bit upper echelon, and the Raiders have a better offensive line. But I think the Bills might just have a little bit too much firepower, especially being on the road where there's not going to be fans in the stadium. I don't believe in Allegiant it shouldn't be an issue for the Bills traveling. So I think it's going to be somewhat similar to what you said. I said 27-21 Bills.
Okay, I like that. I like the thought of the possessions in this game being somewhat quick due to the fact that you do got Josh Jacobs, and if everything goes as planned, if this offense can take it to that next level, I want to see Devin Singletary get fed, not in between the tackles, but more in the passing game. And I think that that's another dimension that is just too good to pass up, man. This guy gets 5 yards a carry in between the tackles, and he can really take it, up to 8 to 10 yards. It's got that first twitch, first one cut move. He turned that guy inside out. I don't even know who the guy was. Amazing. I didn't even get a chance to see who the guy was because he fell backwards. I didn't even get to see his number, his last name, and then they cut to the next play. So that's how. I think Devin Singletary is the man. But yeah, I definitely agree with you that the possessions will be a little bit quicker to the run game, and obviously this Bills offense I think is head and shoulders better than the Oakland Raiders offense, especially with Ruggs out, especially with Edwards. Ruggs is banged up, as you said. They didn't say that he's out officially yet, but it's not looking good. And really keeping an eye on Jacobs and Waller is what they got to do. David, man, this was awesome. You were fantastic. I have to say, I loved the takes that you brought to the show. Keep doing what you're doing, man. The Bills Guys podcast, it's on the Buffalo Fanatics radio network, Buffalo versus everybody, as they say. It's always been that way. It always will be that way. I like it that way. Do you like it that way?
Yeah, I don't mind it. We never get respect even when we're doing well. So it's like, hey, perennial underdog, use it as a chip. I'm fine with it.
Right. Josh Allen's got the chip on his shoulder. Bills Mafia's got the chip on their shoulder. It's like it's a match made in heaven. Really is. Fits in like a glove. Last question, though, before we wrap up, I did want to touch on this. Do you think, to end the show, do you think that at any point in the 2020 season, will we see fans in the stands at Bill Stadium?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I do.
Okay.
But it may not be until the playoffs. We'll see.
Oh man, that would be a real tough game to pass up.
I mean, the fact that they're already talking about like a 7,000 and the Bills want 9,000. I feel like we'll get to that point maybe by November. Hopefully, I'll stay quietly confident that at some point we'll at least have some fans in the stadium this year.
Leaving the Bills Mafia with some optimism. We need all the optimism that we could get in 2020. Let me tell you. Oh my God! Especially, I'm not a political guy, but flipping through the channels, I flip through the channels, man. I'm not watching any of that political crap that's going on right now. It's all about the Bills Mafia. It's all about one Buffalo. It's all about the Buffalo Bills 3-0 start. David Tilton, what a pleasure for joining me. Thank you so much for joining me. What a pleasure it was. Take care and keep doing what you're doing, man. Thanks,
man. It's been great. Appreciate it.
For all of the folks at home, provide the social media, and they can follow you on Twitter and Instagram and whatever social media sites you're on.
Yeah, so Instagram and Twitter, at Tilt Money. We also have the Bills Guys on Twitter, which is the joint account for mine and Steve's show, where we both kind of tweet out from that. That's like our show handle, and obviously you can find us on Buffalo Fanatics. We're live every Monday and Thursday nights. 7:45, leading you into the games. We do our live shows Monday and Thursday, so you can find us there.
Awesome. Great stuff, man. Thank you so much for tuning in, everyone, and thank you, David, for joining me. Take care, man.
Take care. Thank you.
So that was David Tilton of the Bills Guys. Thank you so much for joining me, David. We got a big week ahead, week 4. As always, I will be providing you some fantasy football information for week 4, who you need to start, who you need to add. Waiver Wire Wednesday was today, so I'm going to go through who I added in my league, and I'm going to go through who you should add. So expect that on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast Facebook page and YouTube channel. Take care, everybody. Go Bills. Thank you so much for tuning in.